Hello, welcome to the Bitcoin Standard podcast. Our guest today is Tony. Tony works at the Bitcoin Way, which is the sponsor of this show and a company that helps get you set up with Bitcoin. If you're new to Bitcoin, if you're wondering about how to get your self custody in order, if you're wondering why you should run a node or whether you should run a node, if you have questions about the security of your setup, the Bitcoin Way are there to help you. I've used them myself and I highly recommend their services. And it's always fun to be talking to Tony. He's joined us before, given us a lot of very useful information. So, Tony, thanks for coming again.
Thanks for having me, Saif. It's good to be here, man.
All right, so I'm going to begin by asking you the general question, which I sort of asked you last time as well, but it's been a while, so let's see if things have changed. What is your recommendation today for somebody who's getting into Bitcoin? So, I've taken the orange pill. I've figured it out. I've understood it. And now I want to start buying and accumulating Bitcoin. What should I do?
Well, step one is understand that now that you've made this decision, you are now the head of security. So you are putting together the foundation, the bank that's going to be storing your generational wealth. And so the attention to detail cannot be stressed enough when it comes to this. And this is something that needs to be ongoing forever because technology is going to continue to evolve, and we continuously need to monitor and fine tune our setup to make sure we're fully updated with the latest security protocols and enhancements that are available to us. So for a proper self custody foundation, I mean, we break it down into four easy steps, starting with we like to set up and create encrypted vaults that users can safeguard sensitive pieces of information other than the seed phrase, obviously, which is created offline and remains offline forever. But for other elements that are set up and configured throughout this process, we need somewhere secure to put them. Encrypted vaults are a perfect location for such data. And at the same time, they can be scaled into inheritance plans. So if you want to leave, important pieces of information for those that come after you, that would be a good and safe location for them to put it. All the solutions that we recommend are open source or verifiable source from beginning to end. We don't trust anything that is closed source for obvious reasons. And it's usually a one-way street in terms of if you lose or misplace something, there's no recovery. That's really why we can trust it. So a lot of people tend to get stressed. What if I make a mistake and what have you? Well, this is why we go through proper training. Giving strict guidelines and unofficial homework, so to speak, so that people go through the process enough times so that the probability of them running into a mistake is almost close to zero. And so once we get past the encrypted vaults, we like to focus on fully air-gapped wallets. These are the only wallets that we recommend, open source or verifiable source, Bitcoin only. The device never ever touches a computer. Doesn't matter what the brand is. If it connects to a computer, we won't recommend it. Not necessarily that there's a problem with those, but we don't take the chances anyhow. And then once that's accounted for, we start with an advanced single sig setup for most users, especially those that don't have a strong technical background. You want to keep things as straightforward and as simple as possible. And as their comfort level with the tech, the existing tech, grows, then we can slowly scale into some of the more advanced stuff like multi-sig if they wanted to. It's not a race at that point. We're not here to go from 0 to 100, in 15 minutes. We're here to ensure that everybody has a proper foundation, one, knowledge-wise, and two, structure-wise, to protect their generational wealth. And so once the air-gapped wallet is taken care of, we ensure that every Bitcoiner is absolutely running a Bitcoin node, which is also open source. And so that way, the Bitcoin wallets are configured to always transact via their own proper nodes, no matter where they are globally. So every sending and receiving transaction is fully private now because it's going through your own hardware. And you also know with 100% certainty that that Bitcoin blockchain that you're verifying against has not been tampered with because it's literally sitting in your home or office, wherever that may be. Now, some of the more advanced users, we suggest that they run multiple nodes, essentially for backups. In case one of them goes down, they can reroute the traffic to another one, what have you. But it's not a must, but it's always good to have for redundancy, because every node anyhow that comes online adds significantly to the decentralization and strength of the entire Bitcoin network. So it's a win for the whole community as a whole. And then once that's in place, we have ongoing remote support. I mean, at the end of the day, we're an IT cybersecurity team. So any issues or fine tuning that are required, whether it's on the network, firewalls, and all that stuff, we can handle and troubleshoot extremely well, very efficiently. But the main priority always starts with protecting the money, which is Bitcoin in proper self custody. And then once that's done, we can move on to the cybersecurity side of things, where we focus on securing the devices that manage the money. And by that, like, we lock down the computers, we lock down the phones, multi-layered VPNs, privacy, DNS servers, firewalls, all that stuff constantly running in the background without any user interaction required. So that gives the user the peace of mind knowing that whether they're at home or abroad, regardless of the internet connection that they're plugged into, they don't have to worry about rogue devices siphoning data off of their systems whatsoever. And we also go into de-googled phones for those that are, worried about privacy. We can dive deep into that side of things. But fundamentally, we always want people to start by ensuring that their money is safe, because if that's not accounted for, nothing else really matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when it comes to keeping the money safe, you're still with the single sig. How do you recommend people do it? Which wallets are you recommending these days? Still cold card, right?
Yeah, open source, verifiable source, cold card, foundation passport, that kind of product is perfect for this. I mean, they're legitimate companies, they're reputable companies, their code is verifiable, they're Bitcoin only, there's no other cryptocurrencies, they don't connect to a computer, they meet all the criteria that we're looking for a hardware wallet. So if you have any one of these two products, there's even Seed Signer. Some people debate that maybe, okay, the Raspberry Pi has some issues, but that's also debatable. But they are also an excellent product for those that prefer, the user interface and maneuverability of that wallet.
Yeah. And what about multi-sig? Are you doing multi-sig? Do you recommend it, or do you recommend it only for advanced users?
We recommend multi-sig mostly for advanced users. And just to be clear, we do not do any collaborative multi-sig with anyone, no matter what, nor do we recommend these services. Now, there's been a lot of debate around this as to why. Anything is better than leaving your money, your Bitcoin, on an exchange. That's for sure. And anyone, providing services and steps to get people off the exchange, it's a win. But you need to be aware of the trade-offs, the pros and cons of certain solutions that are being offered. Collaborative custody is marketed as something that protects you in the event that you lose one of your keys. So the way, essentially, it's a multi-sig where you hold two out of the three keys, and whatever institution you're working with, they are the third signing device. So in case you lose one of your keys, you can contact them, they can sign for you, and life goes on. So that's marketed to, for, I'd say, I don't know, like, to prey on people's ignorance or people's fears or people's fear of own responsibility. But what's not being said in that system is that the companies that are collaborating with have full access to your wallet. They know how much you have, they know what you spend, when you spend, how much like, they know all of that. So there's zero privacy. Another issue with them is that a lot of them KYC you. So you are giving away a lot of that private information to a third-party company, and you don't know what their cybersecurity measures are to protect your data. So if they get hacked, then your info is leaked on a database that belongs to someone with bad intentions. So that could potentially be a problem you have to deal with. Another big thing that plays upon, the if you lose one key, they can sign. What if one day a government coerces these companies and tells them you are forbidden to sign for anyone, or you go to jail unless you do X, Y, and Z, and you've lost one of your keys? Well, now you're effectively stuck with no access to anything. So all of these risks are real, and they can happen and will happen in extreme situations. And I foresee that coming as things get worse in the world and the fiat system continues to collapse and the measures become more restrictive. That can and will happen. So we don't like this procedure. So if somebody wants a collaborative custody setup or a multi-sig setup, we will build it for them, but with the use of their people. So if you want to do this, I would ask you, all right, come to me with 3 people that you essentially trust with your life, and we will build that collaborative multi-sig for you, with you, train absolutely everyone, but done right. So the chances of a problem amongst people that you trust is much, much lower than that of trusting a third-party institution. So that's our take on collaborative multisig and why we don't do it or sign for anyone.
Yeah, I think that's these are very good points. I should clarify. I've said this in the previous episode, but I'll say it again. You guys don't touch anybody's Bitcoin. So everything you do it over Zoom or over email when you're telling them what to do and how to do things. But you never handle the Bitcoin. So that's part of the reason why you don't get into collaborative custody arrangements. You're just there as IT support. You're not a
Absolutely.
custodian. You're not a Bitcoin financial services company. You don't manage people's Bitcoins.
Absolutely not. We don't touch anybody's big stone. We don't need to know how much you have. All our calls are done over encrypted video audio calls. There's never any remote control. There's only screen sharing because we need to see what you're looking at in order to guide you, press here, do this, that type of thing. But there's never any sensitive information disclosed at any point in time. We are not a financial institution. We're not required to KYC anyone, and we categorically do not do that. So we don't hold any information belonging to anyone. So in that sense, we were full advocates of the privacy movement, and we respect everybody's right to it.
Okay, so then what would you say are the trade offs and the pros and cons of this collaborative custody with 3 people or 2 other people, you and 2 other people that you trust, versus holding a single SIG? Or another way of framing this question is, you said for you recommend multisig for advanced users. Well, how do you become advanced user? Like, where do you get your black belt from exactly? How do I know if I'm ready?
Yeah, of course. No, you have to start off with single sig and understand the basics and learn the mechanics of all that works, implement, learn what passphrases are, get comfortable with that whole ecosystem. Enough. Like, it's not something that you're going to rush into, and it's really education, training, discipline, and repetitiveness. At least in the beginning, when you've never done it, it's like you have to repeat the exercise until it becomes normalized in your brain. So whether you're transacting with $1 or 1 million, it should be as comfortable as having a cup of coffee. Like, the anxiety around that should no longer exist. And this is where our aim, to get users who have never done this before, never seen this before, to that level of self-confidence and comfort. And so we cannot rush people into this, so that's why we handhold them, and we break down these consults into multiple calls so that it's broken down into bite-sized pieces, easy for everyone to understand. You don't need a tech background to learn this. All you have to do is be comfortable on a computer and be okay with following instructions, which are extremely clear. So we've streamlined that process really well. We know what the most commonly asked questions are, so we have them. And in any case, in all our consults, there's never any stupid questions. So individuals are welcome to ask anything that comes to mind, no matter how silly they may think it is. If it bothers them, it's a valid question. We will answer it regardless. And we stay in touch with everybody 24/7. We have private chat rooms between us and the people that we consult with. Yeah, anyone has a comment, question at any point during the day, you can drop it in there. Somebody will answer you.
Yeah.
Now, to answer your question about the multi-sig, why is it important? Well, some people that have a lot of money, for example, feel safer when the trust is broken up, or if it's a big company, or if it's like a family trust or something of that sort, where they need to break the trust model. They can't leave it in the hands of one person. And so multi-sig makes sense. But again, that multi-sig, ideally you want to have it with people that you trust rather than strangers that you have no control over. This is where our philosophy differs from like the other collaborative custody solutions that are out there. And so each one needs to assess these trade-offs and see what they're comfortable with. So if they're okay working with a company because they like them, whatever, then that's fine. But just understand what the risks are, because there are risks. There's no such thing as no risk. There are risks to that, and this in the same way that there are risks to full self-custody. Like, if you don't do the work and are careless with managing your information and you lose something, well, then you're going to lock yourself out of your funds as well. So both approaches require you to pay attention, but full responsibility requires less trust of external parties. And that's really the key, because the Bitcoin white paper was written for self custody. It wasn't created or designed for somebody else is going to take care of it custody. It's created for self custody. But since we've never seen it before, it's something new that we need to learn.
Yeah. What would you say are the benefits and trade-offs of multisig versus just setting up a passphrase? What do you recommend in that case?
It depends on the technical level of the user. Most beginners will find it much simpler to learn what a passphrase is and to manage it versus multisig, which requires a minimum of 3 hardware wallets and all the moving parts surrounding each one of them. The passphrase is essentially, it's a word or sentence that exists in your head. Like the user invents it and they enter it on their wallet in order to activate the actual hidden wallet where their funds will be stored. So it's a very powerful way of setting up your single sig, because it protects you against the event of your seed phrase being compromised. So if somebody comes up to you and tells you, give me your seed phrase, well, you can essentially give it to them and not worry that they're going to steal your funds, because your funds aren't actually on that seed phrase. So there's many ways to become creative with this. You either leave like a dummy amount on the seed phrase wallet, or there's many ways to play around with this. But essentially, the passphrase, that hidden wallet, is where your funds would be. So it's a lot easier for someone who's never done this before to remember and be responsible for two pieces of information, the seed phrase and the passphrase, versus 3 different hardware wallets and all the moving parts surrounding that. That's why I'm saying, like, it takes a certain level of technical comfort. Then we can move into the multisig if the user wants to. But we test everyone first to make sure that they really do have the technical
Yeah.
comfort level before we just say yes.
But if you don't really have two people that you are able to trust with these keys, because you don't have people that are that close or that trusted, or because they're just not very good with handling data, or not very tech savvy, or not very secure, they don't have the space in which they could keep those things. If those are the conditions, then you're better off using a passphrase than going with multisig. I don't think you need to obsess over multisig if you're unable to secure it, because you do not want to over egg the omelet, as they say, create a setup that is ideal at the risk of trusting people that you shouldn't be trusting for whatever reason.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be super complex to be secure. A single sig with a good passphrase is extremely secure. And in fact, most people don't do multi-sig. I mean, I don't know if anybody has statistics for this, but I'm fairly certain most people don't do multi-sig. Or if they do it, it's for very specific reasons, because of, like those that I mentioned, either it's extremely high net worth, or there's like family trust issues or company trust issues, things along those lines. Yes, okay, you have to put it together. But again, do it yourself without the need to trust external parties that you have no control over. That's really the key, and what we recommend the most.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Principles of Economics, my complete guide to understanding economics, is now available in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook from Saifedean.com, Amazon, and many more booksellers worldwide. And now I am also teaching a course based on this book on my website, Saifedean.com. Principles of Economics will run the whole academic year from September to June, and will have a new lecture every 2 weeks, as well as weekly live online discussion seminars open to learners from all over the world and from all walks of life. Whether you're a student, a professional, or a retiree, you are making economic decisions every day, and this course will arm you with the wisdom of centuries of economists to improve your economic decision making. You'll also get a free book of Principles of Economics if you sign up for the course. Go to Saifedean.com and sign up now. Now, in terms of privacy, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin privacy now, and ways of securing Bitcoin privacy? Since we last spoke, the Samurai developers have been arrested, and the wallet has gone offline. So
Mm.
people who used to use it can no longer really use it as it is. The app stopped working. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on how this portends for Bitcoin privacy in the future and current best practices? What do you recommend people do?
It's a sad reality what happened to the samurai guys, and yeah, it's clear, it's very clear that privacy is under attack, and it's very disappointing to see this. Currently, there isn't much privacy on Bitcoin, as everybody is aware. Everything is fully transparent. So, but there are technologies being developed in order to address that. One of them that I'm really paying attention to is called silent payments, where you can technically use one address all the time, but without giving away the history of your wallet. So somebody sending you funds can only see what they've sent you rather than the entire history of that wallet. So that's something currently being developed. Some wallets have it, not all of them. But from the experiments that we've tried, it works really well. I'm really bullish and optimistic on that one, and I'm hoping we see a lot more like it come about. Otherwise, there's good proper UTXO management that you can do, in terms of, minimizing the exposure to how much you have in your wallet. But in terms of privacy on the Bitcoin itself, we're very limited with what we have right now. It's more like you want to make sure that your devices that you use are more private than they are, and you start adapting better online practices to, protect your privacy. So your computers that you use to manage the money, for example, are they fully protected, multi-layered VPNs? Are you using privacy DNS servers? We deploy now what's known as AI, real-time threat detection, to like filter out 99% of the junk that's online from even reaching your devices. So in that sense, like getting used to using anonymous emails. Don't use your real emails, for important things. Using aliases. A lot of these little tips and tricks can be learned in order to just improve your overall online security in and of itself. Specifically to Bitcoin, I think we have to wait until things mature a bit more, until we get something more robust. But like I said, innovations like silent payments, I'm extremely excited about because they seem to be filling up a big gap in that sense. Because now, when you don't want to use the same address twice, for obvious reasons, privacy reasons. Silent payments addresses that, so it simplifies it even more, reducing the number of steps that are required for normal people that aren't necessarily at ease with constantly changing addresses and understanding why you have to do it and what have you.
Yeah. But in terms of privacy on Lightning, what are your thoughts there? What do you what do you foresee in terms of solutions there, currently available and in the future?
Well, say same principles. I mean, we don't have anything that's fully private now, so you have to assume that everything that you're doing, is fully public. So in terms of Lightning, we always recommend non-custodial wallets. Unfortunately, some of them are no longer available in certain jurisdictions. Like for example, in the U.S., a lot of them have left. One of my favorite ones is Phoenix Wallet. Recently, there's been some projects that have shut down, like Mutiny Wallet. So we have to wait. I mean, this is still a growing platform. We're still at the innovation stage of wallets. There are no end all be all. Some people like Moon wallets. Some people Blue Wallet had Lightning. You can't use it now unless you're connecting to your own node. There's still a lot of things coming up in the space, but we're not fully there yet. In terms of non-custodial solutions, if you want to go the custodial ways, you have them like Wallet of Satoshi, but those comes with their own trade-offs. There is no privacy on them whatsoever, and there is the risk of if one day they decide to go rogue and you have money on that wallet, well, consider it gone. So those are, like the trade-offs that you have to be aware of. And treating a non-custodial Lightning wallet is same thing as treating like an air-gapped wallet. You have to, properly safeguard your seed phrase and all the important elements that protect that wallet. In the event that you lose the phone that the wallet is on, or you delete the app by mistake, you should be able to be in a position where you can recover everything easily. So it requires an understanding and a certain discipline to make sure that these things don't happen.
But if you're able to secure coins onto your channel that aren't associated with your identity, and then you get them onto your Lightning node and you open a few channels with a few people, then it's your node. You have all the seeds for the addresses that are associated with the Lightning address. Don't you think privacy there becomes more feasible.
Yeah, to a certain degree, but I mean, it's essentially the source of the main Bitcoin that you're sending on that Lightning wallet. Like, where does it come from? Like if you've bought it on an exchange, well, your identity is attached to it, right? So the only way you're going to get fully private Bitcoin is if you buy it peer to peer, or if you earn it. Like you provide a service, somebody pays you. Yes, that's private. That's considered like no KYC Bitcoin. That's a bit more private in that sense because it's not linked to your identity.
Well, but the person who sold it to you usually knows you in that situation, so you can't really consider it top secret.
No, no, it's not top secret, but but the person that you bought it from, like you didn't give them a copy of your passport. Like they don't hold any KYC information about you. So like if I send you some Bitcoin, yeah, you know that I'm the one who gave it to you. In that sense, yes, you know who it is. But if you buy it, for example, on a peer-to-peer platform, like RoboSats or BISC, and you're buying it anonymously from someone somewhere else on the planet, well, then you don't know who it is. So there's a bit of that anonymity associated in that transaction as well. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, if you manage to secure them from somebody who doesn't know, I guess if you work for somebody, they're likely to know more about you than if you just buy Bitcoin off of them, uh, of it just over the counter without KYC.
Yeah, well, to buy Bitcoin off of someone, you mean?
Yeah,
To buy Bitcoin off of someone, I mean, they have to just, you have to either earn it or you trade them what? You mean like as a cash transaction?
yes, as a cash transaction without KYC.
Yeah, okay, yeah, cash transactions,
If
okay.
you manage to secure that,
Yeah.
then without the other person knowing you, then you're able to get KYC free on your Lightning network, and then it becomes a lot simpler to engage in transactions that are anonymous. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, yes, of course. But you have to be aware of the dangers of doing such a transaction. Like we never recommend cash transactions with anyone unless you know the person, which sort of defeats the point that you're trying to make, because you can be walking into you can be walking into a one way activity here, and it's not something that we recommend anybody engage in. But yes, technically, what you're saying, if all goes well, you're right, but there are too many risks associated to that perfect scenario that I wouldn't be comfortable doing it.
Yeah. So it's really the bottleneck in terms of privacy is where you got your coins from, and the source of your coins is likely able to connect your identity with the coins that you have. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but like for example, if you buy your Bitcoin on a platform like HODL HODL and you pay for it using cryptocurrency, like how's your identity attached to it? Like if you buy, for example, USDT on, let's say, I don't know, Binance, and then you use that USDT to buy Bitcoin on a platform like HODL HODL. Binance knows that you bought, let's say, $1,000 worth of USDT and that you spent it, but it doesn't know what you
Yeah.
spent it on, right?
Yeah.
So that's how your Bitcoin is private in that sense. So yes, but that you'd have to have, make sure you have a separate wallet for that so you don't commingle the funds. So that's one way of working around the well, I think what you're alluding to. So you wire money into a stable coin and you can use that stable coin to buy the no KYC Bitcoin, then yes, there's no identity linked to you in that sense.
Yeah. Whereas if you try to buy it on Hodl Hodl with a bank account, then
Yeah, all bets are off.
there is a link because the person who's
There is a link.
yeah, and you never know where that information goes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you assume that the person at the other end is just a regular person like you and me. But if you're really unlucky and it's somebody who's not a regular person, somebody who's been put there to see who's doing what, then yeah, you might have a problem to deal with. So yeah, I would stay away from wire transfers, even for peer to peer, no KYC Bitcoin. Do it the crypto way. It's usually much less of a headache and much easier depending where you live. Of course, you have to have access to a platform that lets you buy, for example, these stable coins or other cryptocurrencies that the seller is
Yeah.
willing to trade their Bitcoin against. There's stable coins, there's Monero, there's sellers can accept a whole bunch of different things for their Bitcoin.
Yeah, and of course, another good place for getting Bitcoin is Bitcoin meetups. Probably wherever you
Yeah.
are in the world, there somewhere is a meetup of Bitcoiners, and
Hmm.
there you've got a lot of people with a lot of Bitcoin cash balances. And I always keep stressing the point of the size of cash balances. People use as money the thing that they have the highest amount of cash
Mm.
balances in. And so, if you go to a Bitcoiner meetup, a lot of people with a lot of Bitcoin cash balances, and likely a lot of them have needs of buying or selling at any particular point in time. So this would usually be a good place to get coins from people that don't necessarily have KYC on them. But obviously these,
But you end up knowing them.
yeah, you do end up
You
knowing.
know,
But I
there's a
mean,
face.
yeah, but you don't. You can choose the level of disclosure that you engage in. Of course, this is all hypothetical. We recommend that you KYC all of your coins, of
Of
course,
course,
at all
of
times.
course, of course. You do not engage in any masked parties for Bitcoiners, you know. So,
Yes, do not do mass parties. Make sure that all your Bitcoiners are fully KYC'd, just to
absolutely,
be sure, you know? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. But yes, the ideal scenario is to go to a meetup, with with a mask on, and just interact peer to peer that way. Then yes, you are fully private in that sense, because
Yeah.
nobody can see past the mask.
Yeah. This podcast is also brought to you by the Bitcoin Way, your professional Bitcoin IT team offering you personalized, secure, and comprehensive solutions for every step along your Bitcoin journey. The Bitcoin Way offer live concierge service to guide you with your Bitcoin cold storage, running your node, privacy best practices, inheritance planning, corporate strategy, and multi-sig solutions. They don't touch your coins, they guide you through the process of acquiring your coins and securing them. If you'd like to make your setup safer and more reliable, book a consult with them and see what they have to suggest. If you want to give someone the gift of Bitcoin, get them this professional service that will ensure they start off knowing exactly how to manage their coins and not lose them. Go to thebitcoinway.com and start Bitcoining more confidently. Okay, well, another question I wanted to ask you: what do you think of all of these? Well, not all of these, but of this new seedless backup solution, things like Moon. What are your thoughts on that? Is it good for beginners, or do you think it's just getting people off the wrong foot from the beginning?
I don't like them. I like things the manual way. Have your seed phrase protected offline. Use a passphrase. Protect that as well. And it's this is like I compare that a bit to learning how to drive an automatic car versus a manual car. Like if all things go well, you'll be okay. But if you're stuck in an emergency, you can't drive the car because it's only manual that's available to you. So we stick to basics, stick to the seed phrase, learn how to protect it properly. It's not hard. And then, if you're going to use a passphrase, learn how to protect that as well and understand how they both combine to restore the structure of your wallet, no matter where you are on this planet. As long as you have these key pieces of information, your money is safe. None of the hardware that anyone uses is like it matters. Like the computer can blow up, you can lose your node, can stop working. It doesn't really matter as long as you've got the seed phrase and passphrase. Your money is safe. So that's also a big misconception that many have, that they think that, oh, my node is broken now. Did I lose my funds? Nothing is lost. There's no money on the devices that you're using. The money is on the blockchain, and so your signing devices just tell the blockchain that this little portion here belongs to you. But as long as you don't lose those keys, you'll always have access to them.
Yeah. Now, in terms of securing against compromises of your hardware device, people could tamper with your hardware device when it's on the way to you, or maybe in the supply chain somewhere. Somebody could tamper with it. So, for you, do you think that the fact that this is an air gapped machine makes any kind of tamper meaningless, because that machine is never going to be connected to Wi-Fi or to a laptop, and so it can't call home? Or do you think there are ways around that?
Well, look, initially, when you're going to buy a cold wallet, we have to make sure, first of all, that you're buying one from a reputable manufacturer. And almost all of them, like for example, CoinKite and Foundation, when they ship it with tamper-proof mechanisms that you can inspect upon receiving the device. Like for example, the cold card comes in a tamper-proof plastic bag. So if anybody tried to get into it, you could easily tell and discard the product and contact CoinKite, for further action. Same thing for foundation. In addition to that, when you power up the devices, they run a self check to make sure everything is okay. One risk that people bring up a lot is, what if CoinKite itself does something to the firmware and blows up the device? Well, if that's something that happens, well, there's nothing you can do about this. This is like in the same way, if somebody gets a physical hold of your device and deliberately manually uploads malicious firmware into the device, well, then all bets are off. Recently there was this discussion about dark skippy, which mentions this specifically. If malicious hardware is injected into a device, then it can do whatever it's been programmed to do. So how do you get around this? When you download the firmware to these devices, well, you have to get into the habit of always verifying the file to make sure it's legit, it's coming from the right source, that there's no funny business, associated to it before you apply it. So yes, it's an annoying step. People get, oh, I have to do this. Yes, you have to do this because again, now you're the head of security. This is your bank. This is your money. You can't be lazy with this. You can't take shortcuts. You can't like put it off. It has to be taken seriously full time. It's a full time job doing this, but it's not hard. It's just a series of steps. You just have to remember to do them, and as long as you do them, the probability of running into a problem where that could lead to a loss of funds is close to zero. So yeah, I mean, with the supply chain risks, I mean, those are real risks, but there's a lot of ways to mitigate and to build trust with customers, and I think these companies so far do a terrific job at it.
Yeah, I mean, CoinKite's been around for almost, I think, 10 years, or maybe even
Mm,
more than 10 years at this point. They've been doing Bitcoin hardware. I think that maybe the first to do it, or some of the first to do it. Almost certainly the ones that have been around the longest. They may not have been the first, but they're definitely the ones that are longest. I think. I'm
mm.
not entirely sure. But in any case, I think if they wanted to rug, then they've really messed up by waiting so long, because they could have rugged earlier much more profitably, because they could have gotten a lot more Bitcoin when Bitcoin was worth a lot less. These machines saw so many Bitcoins on them, so they could have rugged enormously. But of course, that on its own is not enough to get you to trust somebody just because he hasn't done it yet. Doesn't mean he won't.
Yeah.
And of course, you do want better. You do want a better way of securing your coins than just trust, of course. So in this case, what do you think the protection afforded by multisig in this case? If you use different devices from different producers, then even if one of them can leak out your private keys, then they presumably can't all leak out the private keys to the same party at the same time, right?
Yes, correct. They only contain one portion of the puzzle. So if one device gets compromised, you've got the other two, and you can replace the compromised one by a non-compromised device, and then life goes on.
Yeah.
But again, like if somebody like a reputable company were to do something like this, I think it would be, first of all, extremely foolish from a business perspective, but more importantly, be extremely dangerous because everybody knows who they are. So that would paint like the biggest target on somebody's forehead to deliberately, do something to steal mass funds from everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a extremely dangerous game. I think it's very unlikely unless somebody's got a suicide mission, and on their to-do list. But yes, technically it is possible.
And you think keeping the device offline is not sufficient protection?
What do you mean?
Just using SD cards to communicate with the machine with a laptop, so you don't connect the device to a laptop at
No.
all. Do you think that's sufficient, or?
Yeah, it's much better than connecting it to a laptop because you don't know if, like, today there may not be an issue, but if in 6 months, 6 years something comes about that affects that connection, well, then it's too late. It's game over. Like, you've been hit by whatever that problem is, and there's no way to go back. But since you're not connecting it, it's impossible for it to reach you. That's why we choose it. We choose that approach above anything else. So if you want to communicate, you can use an SD card if your hardware device doesn't have a camera, or if it has a camera, you can use that as well. Both approaches are good as long as the device itself remains offline. So it's really essentially to keep your seed phrase away from any potential harm.
Yeah. This podcast is brought to you by my friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin only exchange. If you're listening to this podcast, you get that Bitcoin upends everything that government schools teach about money. Coinbits is the money app designed for people like you who understand Bitcoin and want to use it every day. Coinbits pioneered the concept of roundups, which converts your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your debit and credit cards, and your usual purchases are rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you save more in Bitcoin as you spend more. My favorite new Coinbits feature is Spending Insights, which gives you real-time feedback about how much of your money is chasing high-time preference, short-term gratification, and how much you are providing for your future with low-time preference choices. As always, Coinbits provides a terrific self-custody experience. Connect a hardware wallet for automatic withdrawals, so you keep counterparty risk to a minimum. Coinbits also offers peer-to-peer cash and Bitcoin payments, target orders, price alerts, and more. Coinbits can help you do almost anything you need with Bitcoin. Go to coinbits.app/Saifedean and get 3 months free. Again, that is coinbits.app/Saifedean, Saifedean. But you think a device that's offline is, if it's compromised, can it still leak the information to the people who compromised it, or do you think?
Possibly, yes, of course. I mean, if yeah, that's why you don't trust a closed source device, because if the mechanism to generate a seed phrase on a closed source device also can be replicated and just cloned on a different device to pull out all the possible seed phrases that have ever been made, well then who cares if the device is online? It's the code really that is piloting all
Yeah.
of this. So open source, verifiable source only. That way, you don't have to wonder, are they doing this? You can check it for yourself. And if you don't know how to read the code, because most people don't, then everybody knows at least someone who does read the code, and then that they trust, and they get the answers that they're looking for that way. And the products that we recommend, whether it's CoinKite or Foundation, I mean, these people have been around. Their code has millions of eyes on it. So if there was any issue on any level, it would have been exposed within 5 seconds a long time ago. Hopefully, we never, read that tweet. But so far, it's been smooth sailing with either of them.
So, for the extra paranoid, do you have recommendations for things, perhaps just securing your coins without having to rely on any kind of Bitcoin specific device? Do you recommend that, or do you recommend against it?
For the ultra paranoid one, you trust nobody, so you're not going to do collaborative collaborative multi-sig with anyone. If you want to do multi-sig, you're going to do it with yourself using 3 different devices. That's one. You're not going to tell anyone what you're doing. That's two. All your devices that you're using, your computers, your phone, all of these will be exclusively dedicated just to Bitcoin, completely, open source. So you're not going to use a Mac or a PC, even though they're good devices. But for the ultra paranoid, he's going to use something like a Linux machine that's fully locked down. And there's obviously you have to have a certain level of technical know-how to do this. And if you're going to use a phone, you're going to use a de-Googled phone, again, to strip yourself from any identification or attachments to either the App Store, the Google Store, 100%. And you would move to a jurisdiction that doesn't bother you, that protects you as a human being, respects your right to freedom, that is Bitcoin friendly, that is not going to give you a nightmare over or trying to censor you because you said something that they don't like. That's the ultra paranoid. That's a true sovereign individual will take all these measures because at the end of the day they value their time, their energy, and it's your own self-respect and dignity.
Yeah, but I'm talking specifically about the paranoia in terms of devices. Can you just move beyond trusting any Bitcoin specific device because you think these devices are made to carry a lot of Bitcoin? So they're always going to be attractive for people who are going to try and hijack them somewhere along the supply chain in order to put corrupt product in my hands. Now, to be fair, we've not really seen this happen so far. I've never heard of a wallet that had its hardware compromised and then that leaked keys. I don't know if you've ever heard about this happening at any point.
Are you referring like to the scenario where, let's say, I don't know, like a cold card would get compromised type of thing?
Either the company itself
Yeah,
or somewhere in the company without the company knowing, or somewhere in the supply chain. I mean, it's I presume it's not that impossible to replicate the tamper-proof things that
yeah.
are on the cold card, and so somewhere along the supply chain, you could get a cold card swapped out with something very similar. Or I mean, someone else. But I'm trying to. Well, what I'm trying to get to is this: is if you wanted to be extra paranoid, would you dump hardware wallets completely and move to using general computing devices or general phones for generating your key and doing all of those things, because you think there's a lot less chance that, let's say, an 8-year-old smartphone or a 12-year-old laptop, a much lower chance that this had been compromised with software meant to steal Bitcoin private keys.
No, not really. I wouldn't do that. I would still trust these devices that are out there for that because they go through a lot of rigorous testing, and there's a lot of work. I mean, it would be extremely difficult to pull a scenario that you're like the one you're suggesting. And again, like the code behind all of this is available, and there's a lot of eyes and attention on it. So while technically, yes, I mean, there's no such thing as 100% bulletproof, I'd say I'd put that percentage extremely, extremely low of happening. Now, if you really didn't want to do any of that, you'd have to build your own device, right? So you'd have to be your own cold wallet manufacturer, and you have to make sure that every single iota that goes into your product is accounted for, and there's zero chance of any foul play. So doing
But
this,
I guess if you have an old laptop that was, let's say, from 2010, 2012, people weren't putting machines to steal private keys from people since then. And if they did put them back in 2012, they'd have activated them at some point to make all of the billions that they could have used. But you're talking about general computing device, something like a cheap laptop like Dell from a supermarket, from a mall, from a Best Buy. It's highly unlikely to be compromised. But of course, there are other risks associated with trying to roll your own, right?
yeah, yeah, I know, of course. I mean, but first of all, we don't know with 100% certainty that even a machine 12 years old hasn't been, tampered with. Like, we don't know this. We're assuming this. And computers are much easier to hack than a device, designed, for that one specific purpose only. I mean, on a computer, you can plug something as a compromised flash drive that'll execute like 10,000 scripts, as soon as you plug it in, that can override everything on your machine. So if you've got your machine compromised with keyloggers and things of that sort, that's siphoning, like it's like pumping out the info to a remote source without your knowledge, well, then the machine, even though the hardware is not compromised, the device itself is fully compromised, and somebody on the outside has all eyes on it. So that's why, like that's why I wouldn't trust a computer. I would much trust a device, like a cold card, that's a very restrictive, space to do this funny business, than a computer that's designed to do a million things and that is
Yeah.
accessible in a million ways, right? I mean, there are rogue cables. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but your cable that you charge your phone, there are cables that look identical. I mean identical. You can visually cannot tell them apart between your cable for the iPhone or your Android device and a Rogue One. And when you plug in that device into your computer is done. Okay, it's got a remote script that executes at superhuman speeds into that device, taking over everything inside of it. So that's why I'm saying, like, if you really want to be paranoid, first of all, you don't let anyone access any of the hardware that you're using for anything Bitcoin related or just computer related in general. So you don't leave your laptop at a Starbucks and go to the bathroom, with nobody looking at it, because all it takes is a split second. And you have to be very careful, first of all, when you buy generic cables. If you're not buying the originals, Or do you know how to verify that they are that they're not hacked? There are ways to do this, but you need to know how. You need certain gear to test these things. Most people don't have these things, don't even know where to start, venturing into that space. So there's a lot of ground we can cover if we want to go really paranoid on the cybersecurity side of things, but we don't really have to, because as long as we follow like some solid guidelines, most people are unlikely to run into events that can potentially put them make them a threat. There's a lot of education involved, so when when you understand, you don't make silly moves anymore because you're aware of them now. See, it's creating the awareness that helps a lot, and we do a lot of that in all of our consults. We explain certain things that folks have never even considered before, and now they're on the lookout for it. So whether it's flash drives, whether it's USB cables, whatever it is, like all these things that are seemingly innocent may not be, right? And there's no such thing as when you work in cybersecurity, your brain starts to get wired a little different. Like for me, there's never any coincidences. So if I'm walking down the street and I see a flash drive, which happened to me a few times, most people are like, oh, look, it's a free flash drive. Oh, it's 128 gig. It's so cool. Let's plug it to see what's on it. So they take this thing and they plug it into their computer, and it acts like a flash drive. Oh, yeah, look, I have 128 gig. But what they don't know is that in that split second that it went into that computer, that whole machine was hijacked. And even if you take it out, like if you go click, click, it's too late. That's how fast these things execute. And the same thing applies to these charging cables. So when you go into a market and you find, I got a deal, a charging cable at 25 cents, well, there's a reason why it's 25 cents, because these guys are casting a big net to attract a lot of suckers, because as soon as these devices gets plugged in, who knows what they find on the machines. And so, it's the risk reward is huge. And since you can't see anyone,
Yeah.
everything's happening remotely. You know, it's Disneyland.
Yeah. But if you've got an old laptop and you use it only for key generation and then never connect it to the internet or just even destroy it, let's say.
How good is the key generator on that machine? Like how are you validating it?
Yeah, that's the question that I'm asking you. So
Yeah,
how do you weigh that risk versus the risk of supply chain attack on your hardware wallet? What do you think of that?
that's
Because I
a that's
mean, an old laptop, yeah, there's very little chance that there's any kind of Bitcoin specific corruption tool that
mm,
is inside it. There is a chance that there is some kind of keylogger that corrupts that data. But then, if you never connect it to the internet after you generate the keys, you forego that risk. However, there is the risk of not enough entropy in the generation of
yes,
the keys, right?
that's it. That's where my question came from. So if you do it on a laptop where the entropy is not strong enough, and then someday somebody figures out a way to break it online and makes it accessible to everybody on the internet, then what are you going to do? Then it's panic mode, right? So I would
But
I
how
that's
likely is that?
well, these days it's very possible. I mean, these days it's much easier to do that than to breach, for example, a supply chain security for a company that does this specifically. You know what I mean? At least in my opinion, I would see it that way.
But why is the key generation from an old laptop so easy to compromise? Because it's still it's still using the same kind of algorithms as the hardware wallet. How is it so much worse or so much more likely to be compromised? And so far, we've not heard of this. I mean, you would imagine Satoshi's coins. There's probably at least somebody out there trying to figure out the entropy parameters that would have been present in the kind of laptop that Satoshi must have been using. So we have some kind of idea about the laptop that he's used, right?
Yeah.
Because it was a certain period of time and he was running a certain version of Windows, which narrows it down to a few different kinds of, well, not a few, a quite large option, but a lot less than all of the laptops that are out there. So You think that kind of information can lead to um, figuring out the patterns of data that go into the key generation um, uh, for the addresses on his on his coins. If somebody were to try and brute force those based on these parameters, then they'd have a significant chunk of coins because they've not moved since those. So the addresses on which they are very old. But we've not heard of any of these things. You'd imagine somebody would have said something. So I've had 12-year-old coins that have been moved from my wallet. Of course, it could have also happened without anybody finding out. So somebody died and their wallets got
Yeah.
hacked. But what are your thoughts on the likelihood of something like this happening?
That's a very good point that you bring up, but I'd say like the likelihood of something like this is probably very low. But again, I wouldn't trust a key generator on a computer versus a device that was designed specifically for that purpose. But that's like my own personal comfort level is in there. Not to say that what you're suggesting has been cracked. So far, like there hasn't been reports of anything. But if I were to bet which one would get hacked first, I would lean more on the computer generated one simply because I don't think it would have the same level of entropy as a device created, today for that purpose.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, now what about social engineering and phishing attacks?
Mm,
What are your? I mean, these are things are very difficult because nobody knows how to prepare for them because when you're going through them, you never think of yourself as being going through them. You think you're just doing random normal things. But are there any kind of useful OPSEC tips for fighting these kind of attacks?
yeah, social engineering and phishing attacks are the worst kind because they really prey on individual gullibility. Essentially, somebody tricks you into giving up information about you that they use against you. It's really providing a lot of education about this. This is extremely hard. I have the same issue, within members of my own family, um, which is ironic because a lot sometimes they click on something they're not supposed to, and like they drive me completely crazy. I'm like, but why would you do this? But these days remember, you have AI that's playing against you. So the people in the past used to be able to, for example, phishing scams, you would easily identify them because they're poorly put together, there's a lot of spelling mistakes, blah blah, and what have you. So if you're just paying a little bit of attention, you would distinguish them. These days you can't tell them apart. Like even I have to really look at key things. For example, the URLs for links, if you hover over them, it shows you where it's pointing to. So that's usually a first indicator that it's not a legitimate email. But most people just click. They don't have the instinct to put their mouse over the link and just wait, because there's usually a tooltip that shows up and gives you the address. So if you've got like a link from, I don't know, Apple, but you hover over it and it's pointing to XYZ dot whatever, you throw it in the garbage. You don't click on it. So those are pertaining to like phishing scams and emails that you receive. The social engineering ones are much more dangerous because those prey on your personality. I mean, somebody who's good at this is good with people. So they establish a nice rapport with you, make you comfortable, have a nice conversation, talk about normal things initially, and then slip in a question that may seem innocent to you, but is essentially a way of getting you to give up certain pieces of information. And then when a certain level of trust is built, boom, they have you. Because when you like someone, you're comfortable with someone, you're generally, your guards are lowered, right? So if you're talking about certain topics, a lot of people are okay giving away information, sadly. And this is how a lot of folks find themselves in trouble, and they run into situations like, oh my gosh, this and this happened. Well, how did it happen? Think back. And then you put the pieces together, and it's either a phishing scam or somebody tricked them into giving away information they weren't supposed to. This is the hardest type of problem to tackle because it's based on human weakness. Like if you're not a techie person and your mind is not already paranoid to begin with, and you're just like tra la la, well, if you like someone, you're having a conversation with them, you're likely to divulge a lot of things that they're going to ask you. innocently, with no malintent, but they will use that against you. So it's really about creating awareness and training your brain to detect things, whether it's social cues, conversational cues, or in the case of phishing attacks, online cues from like emails that you receive, messages that you receive. If it's something you don't recognize, never open it. Throw it in the garbage right away. If you're getting a call from somebody talking about something that you've never engaged in, shut down the phone. Don't even engage in the conversation. Just close the phone. It's happened to me, where I was contacted by supposedly the cybersecurity police department, but they were asking me about something that first of all, I knew nothing about, and second of all, I was never involved in. And then I asked them a few questions, and they couldn't answer it. And then one of them says, "Okay, but to verify that it's really you, give us your passport ID." I'm like, "Why do you need my passport ID?" And then you hear laughter in the background, so you hang up, right? So hackers these days are getting are much more creative. So when I like dove deep into this one particular incident, I found out that a bunch of people were able to spoof the phone numbers of the official cybersecurity police department, and were using these numbers to contact folks. So when the phone rings, the number that you see actually belongs to the cybercrime police department, but it's not them on the other end of the line.
Wow.
Yes. So that's why you have to be very careful with these things, because like if my dad picked up the phone, for sure he'd be like an open buffet to these people.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful with these things.
My kind of mental defense is to just always get extremely suspicious when anyone is asking for money. It's just
Yes,
doesn't matter how much you're taken by the current circumstance. You're scared, you're worried. As long as that somebody's asking for money and they're trying to elicit from you this reaction of thinking that giving money right now is going to give me something that I really want, it's time to take a step back and think about exactly whether this situation is what it says it is. Because if as soon as you find yourself reaching for your pocket, is time to put yourself in the position of the most cynical person and try and justify to that cynical person why you're reaching out for your pocket. I think this is
absolutely.
probably a good way of looking at it as somebody who's busted a whole bunch of mega scams and identified a lot of them.
A low-hanging giveaway is when somebody asks you to input a password or to give up a seed phrase to enter that somewhere. That's the easiest like giveaway. Whenever you hear these questions about seed phrase or password or something, hang up or delete. Don't respond at all. That's the first dead giveaway, because eventually they're going to talk about whatever, and eventually they're going to hit that question because that's really what they're after. And so when you see it, you hang up. If you haven't detected the scam, up until that point, that should be the giveaway. You cut off all communication. Or if somebody calls you from what seems to be a legitimate number, tell them, "I can't talk right now, I will call you back." And then you can try that same number back and see where it actually rings. You'd be surprised how many times it ends up in places, that have nothing to do where they said it came from, or the person on the other line has no idea what you're talking about. That's how you know that that line was spoofed, which is what happened in my case. The actual cop on the other line, he thought I was nuts. He's like, "I never called you." I'm like, "Okay, no problem, sorry," and I hung up.
Yeah, excellent, excellent information to know. Thank you so much. All right, anybody else have any more questions to ask to Tony? Please write them in the chat. Meanwhile, Tony, let us know what else you guys are up to on in the Bitcoin way. What new
Mm.
things are you up to?
Well, we've expanded a bit on our services since we last spoke. So we initially have, the what we call like priority one, protecting the money, Bitcoin in proper self custody, where we go through a very thorough and comprehensive setup to ensure that people have a solid foundation to safeguard their funds. So we make recommendations on hardware, on software, all of that stuff. We put it together so that the money is safe. And then once that's in place, we move on to the cybersecurity side of things, where we have solutions and services now that protect the devices that you use to manage the money, whether it's your computer, your phone, the Google phones, all of that stuff we cover. And we also have a Plan B residency to citizenship program that focuses on jurisdictions that respect your freedom and are Bitcoin friendly. So if you're not happy where you are, or you feel that your country's headed in a bad direction, you don't want to deal with that nightmare, you can already take the measures to have an insurance policy in your pocket before disaster strikes. So we can help folks with any one of these things. They all fall under the whole sovereignty umbrella, and we're continuously expanding upon these services as we research the space and see what are common needs that arise from the consultations that we have with folks, to see what's missing. Maybe there's something else we can add to the mix. So, but we're like the IT team for a lot of people. Like, you have us on retainer. We're in the background whenever you have a question, whatever it may be, whether it's Bitcoin related, cybersecurity related, just tech related. You have someone you can just message at a moment's notice for a quick answer. Everybody's welcome to call. For the first 30 minutes are free. As far as to get to know you, there's no obligations. And so please do. And we look forward to working with everyone.
Okay, excellent. Well, Tony, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you for everything that you're doing with the Bitcoin way. I've heard a lot of good feedback from satisfied customers that I've sent your way over the past few months. And I look forward to sending many, many more, because I really, really,
Thank you so much, man.
yeah, I really enjoy the peace of mind that people get when they just let all of their doubts and insecurities, they have them handled by a professional, and then they can sleep a lot easier knowing that their Bitcoin is well secured. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Safe. It's always good to be here, man.
All right, take care. Bye bye.